much like, what is the elevator pitch? What's the dream of what you're trying to achieve in your work?
Well, our vision is to improve the lives. Can you hear me fine?
Yep. Yeah, it's good.
Our vision is to improve the lives of 10 million indigenous people. So that's the vision or dream.
Okay. And are you kind of agnostic as to how you do that, if that makes sense?
Yeah. One thing we have learned along our route, so we've been doing it for about 7 years here in New Zealand, and we've explored international markets as well, because our vision is 10 million. There's only approximately 600,000 indigenous Māori in New Zealand, which means our vision takes us overseas. And in those research trips overseas, what we learned is that the methods that we use and apply here will work in another context, another indigenous context, because they have different challenges. It sounds similar, but they've got different challenges when you get down on the ground. So we'll need to apply different methodology to create that impact.
Cool. Okay. And so, into specifically definitions, do you use kind of social innovation, social impact? What's the terminology that you use and that you find resonates with people?
Social impact.
Okay.
So that's the word that we use as the output of our activity as we create social impact. We have a theory of change and so we explain it when we use the word social impact. There's this context behind it. The context behind it is our theory of change. Our theory of change works like this: we're a small organization, we don't have a lot of resources. Therefore, to achieve our vision, working one-on-one with individuals, we'll never get there. We just don't have the resource. So the most strategic thing to do is to work with community organizations that serve a group of population in their community. And these organizations, community organizations, have social services, health services, justice services, youth, and so forth. And our goal is to work with the leaders in those organizations and strengthen the community foundations of those organizations in governance, which is like leadership and strategy, and commercial advisory, how to financially sustain yourself, and then also in entrepreneurship type thinking. So we work and build the capability and inside those organizations and the foundation, so that the impact that they deliver is improved or grown. And how we do that is largely through capability building, putting systems and processes inside these organizations. Because the challenge that these organizations have are the leaders elected from the communities, which means they come from different vocations like teaching, like social services, health services, forestry workers, farmers, fishermen. So when they come onto the organizations, they don't have the skills or structures in place to amplify the impact for their community that they're trying to serve.
Okay. And for those people, do they use the term social impact, or is it just like...
No, they just see it as that's a label that we apply to it, and it's largely driven out of government, because a lot of the funding is, including some of our funding, comes from that viewpoint, and then also from philanthropy as well. Yeah, they don't see it as that. They just see it as helping whānau. Whānau means is a Māori word for family.
Right.
So just helping families.
Yeah.
That's the way,
I was speaking with Akina yesterday, and they used the term. It was Anne Purcell.
Okay.
And she was talking about social, environmental, and cultural impact, which I thought was... So in the UK, we very much just use the term social impact, but it's understood that also means the environment. And we don't really have the same conception of cultural impact. And it seemed by cultural impact, they meant more, basically kind of indigenous communities and that angle of it. So I wondered, yeah, is that a language which resonates with you or not?
Look, we're not. The thing about that language is a label, right? That defines it, and people have different definitions on that label. So I think it's a trap to be trapped, like to just say it's one label. What we often do is we take government language and we convert it so that people in communities or down on the ground can understand it. So we simplify it. We use analogies or stories from ancestors and we tell those stories so that they can grasp and understand the label of the fancy new language, whether it's social enterprise or social impact or impact fund investing and all those sort of labels that we put on it. So yeah, we like the bridge that breaks down that barrier.
Cool. And in terms of the capability building, could you touch a bit more on kind of what that looks like? Like, how much do you see it as like formal education? Is there kind of set things that everyone needs to know, or is it more adaptive based on the context?
There's a range of programs, and yes to both. In some contexts we use more structured approach. So I'll give you a little bit of history. When we're doing governance training, which is a more structured program, governance training is basically training the leaders in how to govern their community organization. And when we first started 7 years ago, we were really passionate about social enterprise and trying to do good. So what we did is we created a governance training program because we thought that's what would solve the need. To do that, we went to the Institute of Directors, who is, like the main governance training organization in our country. And the Institute of Directors, they come from a corporate type model or a larger company type model governance training. And then we thought, okay, well, let's take their stuff, which is a massive book like this, and let's adapt it to suit the indigenous populations. What we found is we went out there, we delivered, we spent tens of thousands of dollars on it, and we came back 9 months later and nothing had changed. So we said that was, hey, that's a depressing moment. Why did that happen? Cut a long story short, what we identified is we were just teaching too much. So what we said is like the corporate type capability building isn't really a match for this niche market. And some of the characteristics of why not is because when you have a corporate type training, they come from the mindset of a lot of resources. They've got lots of people, they've got lots of time, they've got lots of capital that they can put a budget into a project. Whereas the organizations we're dealing with, they have other challenges. They don't have much money. They don't have many people. The skills that they have on board aren't relevant for this type of work. So the contexts of the type of governance training didn't really work. So we cut a long story short, we built a program from ground up. We did it by going to talk to all the successful organizations that are doing social impact and doing good in their communities. And we looked at inside them and said, what are you doing? What tools are you using? What actions are you using? What type of people have you got? What programs? How are you doing your projects? We just unpacked everything, the templates we're using. And then we took all that and then we built our own capability programs. So what we've done is we've built like a ground up or grassroots up relevant to our market capability programs. So that's a more structured approach. When doing that, so going back to your question, when doing that, we can't teach everything. That's one of the founding lessons that we learned from the corporate. So we said, okay, we used the 80-20 principle and said, what's the 20% of things that we should teach these governors that will create 80% of the impact? We identified those things, and that's what we've have structured and focused on. So that's an example of a structured approach to capability building. It's built, to summarize that, ground up. We built it ground up from the communities that we serve. We applied the 80-20 principle, so we don't teach a lot. We just teach a few things really, really well. So it's very structured in that way. In that program, we use a facilitative style rather than an expert at the front of the room, which is different to the Institute of Directors. They use an expert at the front of the room. The facilitator style, what that looks like is we know where we need to lead them to. And what we do is we pose scenarios and we ask questions from the community, and we steer them by asking questions for them to arrive at the answer. We use our authority status to frame up and encourage and give them confidence, by giving them perspective of where they are compared to another organization just like them. Often they're ahead of where their peers are, and they don't have that perception, so it's a constraint in their mindset. So we do a lot of that type facilitative style learning. So that's a little bit about the structuring side. On the other side, though, there's other activities that we do more around the side of things, and that's less structured, because coaching is not about telling them what the answer is. It's like more like the facilitative approach. It's chucking ideas or suggesting ideas, and then allowing the discussion to go where the entrepreneur wants it to go. It's very much like a discussion, and it feels like very casual, and it's counterintuitive to what everyone's used to. They're used to an expert talking in the front of the room, but it works really well for people who don't like to be told what to do.
Yeah,
which are entrepreneurs, suit this category. People that didn't fit into the traditional education system, prefer this style of learning, and
cool.
So in summary, we use both approaches, less structured and structured.
Okay, slightly different question. How did you get involved in this sector, in this sort of work?
Cut a long story short, I grew up and had social challenges myself, so I resonate with those. I had a family that taught me to care about other people as I was growing up. And then I went through this pathway of entrepreneurship, multiple businesses. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and then came a stage where I got disillusioned with making money when I had a challenging time when the GFC landed, impacted, and I saw a lot of ugliness, and I decided I wanted to do everything with social impact. So that was 97. Yeah. Okay. 1997. It's from that experience, my values changed, I guess. Values alignment, going, hey, look, I still have my entrepreneurial skills, but I actually want to do good with them as well. Make money and do good. It's possible to do both.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge that you've either kind of faced and overcome, or still facing in your work?
I think the big hidden elephant in the room, and let me give you context to this, is like you, I've studied social enterprise around 12 countries now. So just funded off my own bat. And then I go into and I speak with a range of support providers in these countries and social entrepreneurs, and I get down on the ground and get amongst them. So that's 12 countries over the last decade. And then I've as an organization, we've worked with 115 social enterprises. So we've got context in this market as well. The summary of that, and then I send a few teams out to the World Social Enterprise Forum and around the world and so forth. And what comes back, glaringly, what comes back, and the challenge for everyone is the economic engine to sustain the social impact. So, or i.e. the business model. How do you financially sustain delivering your social impact? Time and time again, what I've seen is people get a little bit of money for the program that they've submitted or their projects, and then they spend most of that money on impacting on the ground. And I don't knock that, but because from what I've seen, they do fantastic jobs. They know the community. They eventually work it out through trial and error, and their social impact is generally good. But then the government funding runs out, or the philanthropic funding runs out 1 or 2 years later, and then it's pack up shop. So it all breaks down. So the number one, just going back to your question, the number one challenge is the economic engine to sustain the social impact or the business model. And I don't hear it discussed. And when I talk to other social entrepreneurs around the world and unpack their business model using the lean startup business model canvas, when I go through that, like, they're just not clear. Some are, but majority aren't. And I reckon it's a 95% aren't, 5% are. So it's interesting. And I don't think people talk about it enough. I haven't seen it in philanthropic and government. They scoot over it, but they don't really unpack it and go, well, fuck, how do you do it?
What do you think the solution is? Like,
and I'm just going through it with ourselves. It's difficult. I think part of the solution from an operational level is when you get funding, you need to allocate a certain amount at the same time as your social impact for a separate team that requires separate skills to apply the lean startup principles to search for that business model canvas at the same time, rather than pour it all and focus down on your social impact. I reckon you've got to do both at the same time. I have tried many ways, which is like, okay, we'll get the social impact right, then we'll work on the business model. I think it was a mistake in hindsight. I've done that a couple of times to test that. The reason why I think it's a mistake is you kind of get distracted once you're in building your social impact, and once you get it up and live, there's a whole lot of activities. So your thinking is always distracted into your social impact. So I think, the next time we do it, it will be I have two teams working at the same time. Yeah. Sorry. So that's part of the solution. Is about that. Part of the solution is not enough conversation about it, not enough investment into someone disseminating, collating and then disseminating all the potential social impact models. I've always thought there's a gap or a market opportunity for someone to go, okay, here's Tom Shue's business model, and this is some of the key insights from that business model and how to implement it. And then here's Ahsoka's business model, and here's, and so forth. Here's Nesta's business model. So I think if there's someone that captures all these business models, but not just, put it on an A4 page under the framework, Lean Startup framework, but actually breaks it down and then interviews the entrepreneurs alongside it, going, okay, when you're at the stage, the early stage, what did you do, to find the business model? What were the challenges? How do you overcome? It's kind of what you're doing, but just totally focused on the business model side of things. And I think if you were to do that piece of work in the back of your mind, the place that I reckon, if you go inside any business model, the place to look at is what's your repeatable and scalable sales system. Like, in a sales system, is either you can have users and customers. The differences between the user and the customer. The user might be right. Okay. Yeah. So a key thing in Lean Startup is having a repeatable sales process. So that's breaking down all the steps. The first step is I get leads. This is how I get leads. On automatic, I know if I keep doing these activities, I get leads. Then once I've got those leads, this is how I convert. I take these 10 steps to convert the sale. So, I need a proposal. I need to get board sign off, and so forth. Those are what they look like. That's mapped out in the business model. And then people are testing each incremental stage to look at how to improve it. And I think that's the key bit inside the business model. That's the key bit. And I don't think people focus on that bit.
Interesting.
Because if you get that, then you have a repeatable system from which to generate money, and you can sustain yourself,
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Which countries have you visited to speak to social?
Okay, let's go. I've been to Sri Lanka. So I went all over Sri Lanka. I went to Aussie. I went to Canada. I've been to Hawaii. I went to Guatemala, Costa Rica. Where else I went to? I went to Thailand, I looked at. I went to Malaysia, Borneo. I went and spoke to some. Yeah, there's a few.
Cool. Who was doing it best, do you think?
I don't know. Like, I reckon we were. We are, and that comes from the context. I don't know. I never really got. I mean, I learned little things, like little improvements, but nothing like like going, wow, that's such a good way. I hadn't really thought about it. So yeah, I hadn't come across it, but we've been doing it for 7 years solid. Yeah, and across the Māori. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And then in terms of the actual kind of the entrepreneurs or the community organizations that you work with, what do you think is the biggest challenge they face or are facing?
It's the same thing because they're social enterprise. It's the economic engine. Yeah, it's the elephant in the room, and no one's doing anything about it. Okay. What their view is like, when we run out of this project funding, we'll go back to the government. It's like, nah, it doesn't work, man. That's good startup money, but or seed money to start your venture, but eventually you got to get off that thinking. And yeah, and that's kind of like a lot of the organizations that we work with. That's one of their revenue streams is government contracts for social services to their communities. So yeah, I think that's the greatest challenge for them. But there are other challenges as well.
Okay. The final question was, what does the sector need? But I guess you've kind of sort of touched on that.
Yeah.
And I guess it links around to, what is the solution? I mean, do you think that if everybody, as part of regular secondary education, so like, everyone when they're 14 or whatever did proper business, did business courses, do you think that would help address this or not? This idea of kind of, embedding business mindsets, business education, like more throughout society.
I think the current education system, we call it secondary, 14 years and upwards in our country doesn't really prepare our children for the modern world that's here now or what's coming in the future. I think financial skills or financial management skills is an important context. I think, you should touch on sales. I think sales has a dirty perception, and the reality is we all do it. It's just we frame it in a different way. We don't see it. We see it as influencing as another way to language. We're influencing our friends. We're influencing our families. I want you, Mum, I want you to give me some money to go out with my friends. So that's an influence. That's sales. So if you took away that label of sales and taught them the premise of how that works and how you could do that more effectively, yeah, sure, I could see an impact. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. And then, so the ultimate dream. So you said this improving the lives of 10 million indigenous people. Do you want eventually for your organization to kind of work yourself out of a job, like so that you're no longer needed?
Yeah, for sure. The other thing about Te Whare is that's just one social enterprise that we have and work on. We have others. So yeah, for sure. The ideal scenario is we don't exist. We've solved the problem. A wise, more experienced Travis, decades later, and social enterprise, know that if we really want to make that change, then we have to change systems. System changes, because it's a system that outputs this craziness. it's the system is not just the government elements of it, but like the philanthropic elements of it, like the societal structure elements inside, the way we live. So, for example, just to give you an example in our own lives would be, there is a perception that security in our lives, or a form of security, permanent security, is owning a house in our country. So what happens when people get of a certain age, they buy a mortgage and buy a house. Now they're chained to a 25-year mortgage back to the bank to pay the bank. That 25-year mortgage requires them to hold a job, sometimes that they don't enjoy that job, to earn a certain amount of money to service the bank. And if they don't service the bank, then the bank takes their property, which is their form of security. So they're driven to do this work. The challenge with that work is you're working 45 hours a week. And the output of working 45 hours a week is the less amount of time that you spend with your children and your family to bring them up, the less time we're connected. And when we do have moments of space, what we do is we fill it up with social media or other distractions to give us like a few likes to make ourselves feel good about ourselves. So what I'm trying to do is talk about is like the system. The system is like this whole cascade of outcomes, which like trap us into this fucking crazy ass life, the way we're living. So what I now know is like, fuck, you got to change the system and you get different results. In our own world that you're talking about, the system is, philanthropy, traditional philanthropy doesn't work. It's conclusive. Like if you look at the research, they've been around for years, ever. And despite all the billions of dollars invested in, there's been some incremental improvements, but by and large, the charity sector hasn't worked. So, that creates a dependency, like a charitable grant creates a dependency for social entrepreneurs. So they come back next year and they find out they can't get that same amount of money. What they haven't really worked on the economic engine. That's what I mean about system change, is if you really want to make the impact.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. That was a good big picture endpoint. Yeah. So that's all the questions. It's really interesting. Thank you. Is there anything I can kind of answer for you? Any questions about Nesta or the UK?
Anyone working on business models? Now, to give you some context, I have been over to and caught up, spoke to Jeff Mulgan. I had a fucking radical idea, so I fucking jumped on a plane, flew over to the UK, and I was interested in his studio schools ideas. Went around to a few studio schools, spoke to the guys about licensing and bringing it back to this country. So I did run into Jeff Mulgan along that process. And, still I haven't heard of anyone talking about the economic engine. Even Jeff was talking about bees and trees, like joining up local government with intermediaries and from intermediaries joining up the social entrepreneurs.
No, I don't think we have anyone looking specifically at business models. We have we've released recently like a collection of innovation methods, but that is more so as in it's more like a challenge prize type thing. And so that it doesn't have the I guess the sustainability aspect of a business model, if that makes sense, but it's called the Compendium of Innovation Methods, a very kind of
any
grand name.
Have you got a PDF of it, and can you share it?
I can, I'll find the link and send it over.
I mean, it's always worthwhile, but look, the one thing you could do for me is if you come across anyone that's looking at and putting together sustainable business models, that would be of huge value.
Cool, will do. I think because we have people who are looking at what they call the startup ecosystem in the UK, so like tracking accelerators and things like that. So it's interesting that as you point out, there is a gap in terms specifically business models.
Yeah, I know the incubators because we came through an incubator. Plus, I'm a coach, a startup coach as well. So I've gone through, all that stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you can help me find that, that'd be awesome.
Okay. See what I can do. Okay. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
And so at the end of